Good evening, everyone. This is Judi Robinovitz, Score at the Top Learning Centers and Schools. And I'd like to welcome you to this evening's webinar on Florida's state universities and what it takes to get into each of them, and some new facts about them as well. Before we begin, I just want to tell you that we do have a few handouts. So if you look at the GoToWebinar control panel in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, there's a plus sign next to the word handouts. If you click on that, that section will expand. It actually will expand and show three things. There's three different handouts that you may want to download that will be very helpful for, especially one of them, the one that starts SUS. It will be, very helpful for this evening's presentation. And if you don't get them during the presentation, you can always email us, and we're happy to send them to you to be downloaded as PDFs. And if you have any difficulty at all with the audio, you can call into the webinar just by clicking next to the word audio, the plus sign, and then you'll have instructions on how to call in case there's an issue in any way with the audio. And there it is. It tells you to, basically you can make a phone call, and then there are dialing instructions. So without much ado, we're going to get right into the 12 state universities in Florida. And you can pretty much see, which ones they are and where they are located around the state. And I like to joke and say, including one that's in Alabama. It's not quite. University of West Florida is even in a different time zone. So all 12 of our state universities, even though they are markedly different from each other, make admission decisions in exactly the same way. They will all look at a student's academic record, test scores, and what they call holistic information. And I will be going into much more detail on this. But let's start with the fact that your GPA isn't really your GPA, because the GPA that may appear on your high school transcript is not the one that the state universities in Florida use. They recalculate, by the way, as do many colleges, both in and out of state. So let me explain to you exactly how to recalculate your GPA, because it's that recalculated GPA that you'll need in order to determine if it looks like you could be a good academic fit for one or more of our state universities. So first of all, you're only including your core academic courses, English, math, science, social science, and foreign language. And any course that is AP, IB, or ACE, even if it's not listed above. So for example, ACE, travel and tourism, is considered a core academic class by the state universities in Florida. And finally, dual enrollment courses, but dual enrollment courses that are core. So for example, dual enrollment nutrition is not a core course because nutrition doesn't fall under one of the core areas. So you're going to be crossing out your non-core courses, like, your PE, your drama, journalism. These are not considered core courses by our state universities. So your next step is that you're going to convert your grades, which most schools give on the A to F system, to the 4.0 scale. And you need to be consistent to either be always using semester grades or always using year-end grades, and not both. And the reason I bring this up is that for those of you who have children who go to public school in Florida, you'll see in some of the courses that have EOCs, you get a year-end grade, like say Algebra 1. So what you're going to do for any of those courses is just double the grade. If you got a B in Honors Algebra 1, you're going to count it as if they were 2 Bs, because everything else on a public high school transcript for most public high schools in Florida tends to have first semester and second semester grades. So just be consistent. If you go to a high school that only gives year-end grades, and there are some public high schools actually in the Miami area that give just a single year-end grade, then you stick with year-end grades. Anyway, after you convert the A to F to the 4.0 scale, you're going to just add up all of the points. So for example, for a student who is currently a senior, that student probably took 5 core academic subjects, freshman year, sophomore year, and junior year, each semester. So that's 10 per year, or a total of 30. And that's about what you might have if you're now a senior, is 30 grades to be added up. Now you're also going to add weight. And this is going to come as a big surprise to many because this is not the same weight that any of our public high schools use. So it's a half a point for any honors or pre-IB course, or if any school gives something like pre-AP or pre-ACE, it's a half a point per semester. And if it's an AP, IB, ACE, or core dual enrollment, it's 1 point. And many of your kids have probably said to you, well, you know, if I take AP US History, and I get an A, I'm getting 4 points for the A and 2 points for the AP, so it's 6 points. Not when you're applying to a state university in Florida or almost any other university that does weighted grades. It's 1 point. And by the way, your grade has to be a C or better, actually a C minus or better, which means that if you haven't gotten a D in AP biology, you are not getting the extra credit for the AP. So you get the weight per semester for honors and AP if your grade is at least a C. So you're adding those half and whole points to what you have already, and then you're dividing by the total number of core courses. So what we just talked about might be, you know, dividing by 30. Now that is actually the GPA that is used by Florida's state universities, and I can guarantee that it will almost always be lower, and sometimes substantially lower, than the weighted GPA that appears on a public school transcript, or even the weighted GPA that appears on a private school transcript. And yes, there are schools, other schools that might use a GPA from the transcript, but our 12 state universities do not. And if you'd like some help in calculating your GPA the way our state universities calculate it, you can go to our website. We have a special website called Recalculate My GPA. You don't even have to capitalize it the way we have here, but you'll be prompted to put in how many A's, how many B's, etc. By the way, you may have noticed I didn't say anything about pluses and minuses. So for those of you who go to high school in Broward County, go to a public high school, you know that you can get a B plus, a C plus. Let's hope you don't get any lower pluses. Guess what? Those pluses get thrown away. Our state universities do not use pluses and minuses. So unfortunately, a B plus is not like, oh my God, it's almost an A. It's not, it's a B. So that's the GPA, but that's not enough in terms of how a university is going to look at you. Yes, it's going to be important that your GPA be pretty much in range with what a typical admitted student looks like. And I'll show you some numbers soon. But the rigor of your curriculum is incredibly important. In fact, for almost any college that you apply to, they're looking for kids who challenge themselves academically, which pretty much means that every year you're taking 5 core academic subjects. Even though your counselor may say to you at school, well, you know, you already have met your science requirement for graduation. You have 3 years of science. You don't need another science. Well, guess what? You should take a science your senior year. Or if you've already had 4 years of math, you may say, well, I don't need another math. Well, guess what? You should take a senior year math course. And although our state universities only require 2 years of a foreign language, if you have 3 or 4 years of the same language, it looks a bit better. So just know that no matter where you're going to be applying to school, the more rigorous your curriculum, the better prepared you will actually be for college. And rigor is relative. The harder the university is to get into, the more competitive it is in admissions, the more rigorous your high school schedule needs to look. So in other words, the student who has a 4.0 because she has straight A's, but has not taken honors or AP courses, is probably not going to get into a number of the state universities in Florida that look like they take 4.0 kids because she doesn't have rigor. Whereas a student who has a much more rigorous curriculum will have a better chance, and also a better chance of success once in college. So there are some minimum eligibility requirements to even be considered for admission at any one of our state universities. For example, our state universities say that they will not consider a student who doesn't have at least a 2.5 GPA the way they recalculate it, and that they must meet minimum SAT or ACT score requirements. And these numbers that I'm showing you are basically below average. So most kids will wind up having numbers, you know, above here. And there is also a requirement in terms of how many years of English or math or science you need to have to be considered. but the number you need to be considered is not necessarily the number that you need to really be admitted, especially for some of our more competitive state universities. And these almost mirror high school graduation requirements, although you can graduate from many high schools in Florida without any foreign language, but you can't get into a state university in Florida without it, or possibly having a foreign language waiver because of a learning disability. And just to give you an idea, and by the way, you may want to, you can always take a picture of the slide. There'll be two more things coming to this slide that will give you a more full picture. But one of your handouts that you were able to download does have the same GPA ranges. And these GPA ranges were the mid 50% for students who were admitted. So for example, for the students who got into FSU this year for the fall, 50% of them had a GPA between 4.1 and 4.5. So what does that really tell you? Well, 25% had more than a 4.5. Well, we don't care about those smarty kids, but 25% also had less than a 4.1. Some of those kids will have been perhaps recruited athletes or underrepresented minorities or socioeconomically disadvantaged students, but there will still be a number of, let's say, just normal, vanilla, everyday students who have below a 4.1. How much below can you really have? Difficult to say. That's not a number that gets published, but I would say a student will be competitive for FSU, everything else being equal, if her GPA is maybe around, say, a 4.3, recalculated, pretty much the midpoint of the range. These were the midpoint ranges for the SAT and ACT students of the who were admitted. And again, if I stick with FSU for a moment, 25% had less than a 1270. So if you have a score of, let's say, 1130, you probably need to take the SAT again to try to get closer to the range. And the more into the midpoint of the range or above you are, probably the better chances. But again, it goes beyond just GPA and test scores. But this is at least a starting point to know whether you might be, in range and a school would be a stretch for you, or perhaps a target school, or even a very likely school that you'll get into. And our state universities, like all other colleges, do not care whether you take SAT or ACT. They're treated 100% the same. And then finally, the percent admitted. One of these numbers is asterisked. Actually, FAMU, forgive me, FAMU should also be asterisked. There were two colleges that did not yet report the percentage of students whom they admitted for the fall, but this can give you an idea of how selective our universities are getting, and some that are not quite as selective. So a little housekeeping with SAT and ACT, a few things that you need to know. You are probably aware of the fact that both SAT and ACT have an optional essay. Not one of our 12 state universities requires that optional essay. So unless you're applying to a college that does require or recommend it, and recommend really does mean required, don't waste your money, don't take it, don't prep for it, it's not needed. And in terms of super scoring, which basically means taking your highest sub scores in order to get your total score that a college will use, every one of our 12 state universities will super score the SAT. Although you can't just send them your best math and your best reading, writing, you have to send your full score set, and then they will pick the best math and the best reading, writing. As far as ACT goes, this was pretty much a major change this year. All but UCF will super score the ACT, which has 4 sub-scores. UF recently changed its policy, like weeks ago, that it used to not super score the ACT, but just decided that it will super score the ACT because ACT actually recently changed its stance on super scoring and now says it's okay. I did call UCF to find out if they're changing their policy, and they basically said that it is now under consideration. So I won't be surprised if, maybe not for this year, but for next year, that UCF might start to super score the ACT. And then finally, there is a growing trend among colleges to not require you to send an official score report, but to self-report your scores as part of the application. And if accepted and you decide to matriculate at that college, then you send your score report. So what you're doing is you're basically saving money, because you know that unless you send some score reports at the time that you actually take the register for the SAT or ACT, where you get, I think it's 4 free ones. If you wait until later to send score reports, it costs you money. But here are 3 of our 12 state universities that will take a self-reported SAT or ACT score. And you're going to see this more and more across the country. And the application process has gotten considerably more complex, I'm sorry to say. So there are 2 major players in the application platform game, if you will. Common App, which is accepted by about 840 universities across the country, and Coalition App, which is accepted by 100-ish colleges across the country. So 9 of our state universities accept the Common App, which means it's one application for all 9 of them. And so the base pages of Common App, and there are 6 base pages of Common App, are the same for all of these 9 state universities. Even they share, everything that's on there. They don't know where you're applying, but it's one application. However, colleges on Common App are free to have additional essay questions and requirements like uploading a resume as part of like their sub-application, if you will. And then finally, the new kid on the block is called Coalition Application. It's not, in my opinion, quite as user-friendly as Common App, and many of the colleges that are on Common App are also on the Coalition App. For example, all 8 Ivy League universities are on both. So 3 of our state universities do accept the Coalition App, and I have to say that I am prejudiced that if you're going to apply to FSU or UF, I would rather see the student do the Common App. I just think it's much more intuitive. It's a bit easier to complete. And in fact, this is also a big change because for the past few years, University of Florida has been what's called Coalition Exclusive. It was the only application they accepted, which meant that if a student was applying almost anywhere other than UF, there was a very good chance that student was doing both the Common App and the Coalition App. But now that FSU and UF both take the Common App, it does make life easier for kids who are applying to those schools. University of South Florida, which accepts the Coalition App, also has its own application, which I would encourage doing because I think it's easier to do. And then finally, there are 2 schools in our state university system, FAMU and Florida International, that only have their own application. And you'll find their applications on their websites. So yes, your kids might be filling out 3 completely different applications online. Or 4, who knows? Anyway, recommendations. Most of our state universities not only don't want them, but they'll specifically say, we won't even look at them. We'll throw them in the garbage if we get them. And that is because why should they reward you for sending a recommendation? Or maybe I should say it the other way. Why are they punishing the other kids who followed the rules and didn't send a recommendation? And certainly, if there's something important that you feel a college needs to know, many of these applications actually have space for additional information where you can share perhaps that you had a really bad sophomore year because there was some traumatic event, in your life, or maybe your personal statement, deals with it. But there really are just 4 of our state universities that say, okay, that you need application, that you need recommendations. But the biggies, the ones that are hardest to get into, like UF, FSU, UCF, no recommendations. And just a little word about deadlines, because some of these deadlines are around the corner, 6 weeks away. UF and FSU only have a single deadline of November 1st. And you can see what the decision dates are. These are the dates on which they will announce their decisions. And one of these is a big change. FSU has always had 2 rounds of admission. But last year, they found that the kids who applied for their second round of admission, which was well after November 1st, they really couldn't admit very many of those kids at all because they had already pretty much filled the freshman class. In fact, I believe this year is their largest freshman class ever. And if you don't get your application to UF or FSU by November 1st, will they still accept it? The answer is yes. Are you likely to get in? The answer is not yes. And finally, Florida Polytech, which is our newest state university, and FAMU also have a November 1 initial deadline, but they both have follow-up deadlines afterwards. And then finally, moving a little bit more into this, Florida Gulf Coast University actually has something called early action. So you'll hear the terms bandied about early action and early decision. Typically for both of them, there's a November deadline, although there are some schools like Georgia Tech or UVA that have deadlines of October 15th, which is actually the earliest allowable application deadline. But early action, basically you're applying early, you're finding out relatively early, and it's not binding. And in fact, in most cases, it does improve your chances for admission if you apply early action. So my advice to you is for any college that is on your list that offers early action that is non-restrictive, which most of them are that offer it, please apply early action to improve your chances.
So I just went across this the other day. Oh.
Okay. There's also a November 1st, I'll take questions in a few minutes. There's also a November 1st early decision, which apply by November 1st, find out early. Typically, they're December decisions, but early decision is binding, which means you can apply to one college only, sort of. There's some cases where you can apply to two, but apply to early. If you apply early decision, you must go. It's binding. It's morally binding. It definitely improves your chances, and I'll show you some data. I believe I have some data that I can show you further on that shows how much it improves your chances. It may be in the presentation that I'm doing next week. We'll see if I come to this. But anyway, you can see that there are 6 colleges that offer some form of a November 1st deadline. And then the rest of our state universities have what's called rolling admission. And rolling admission, and I'll use UCF as the prime example because they probably have more applications than almost anyone since they were the largest of our state universities. They're actually making decisions already this month. It basically means they're not waiting for a particular date to get all the applications in, review them all in one lump sum, and then on a particular date announce decisions. Once they have your application and any supporting materials they may need, such as your transcript or your test scores, and certainly your application fee or your fee waiver, within a couple of weeks, they will make a decision. So they're doing things on a rolling basis. And what that really means is that if you apply to any college that offers rolling admission, apply as early as you possibly can, because your decision will come out typically faster, and it tends to get a little bit harder to get in as the year goes on. So a student who sort of procrastinates and doesn't apply to UCF until, let's say, March or April, who might have gotten in now in September, might not get in March or April. So there is tremendous pressure on kids to apply early. Early action when it's available and non-restrictive. Rolling admission, the earlier the better. Early decision only if there's a college that steals your heart and where you're saying, yes, I will kill to go here. And the reason I mentioned that there are times that you, well, not literally kill to go there, but you know what I mean, I hope. And I mentioned before that there are times that you can apply to 2 colleges early decision. And that is because some colleges have 2 rounds of early decision. Early decision 1 tends to be for most colleges, if they offer it, a November 1 deadline. And they usually let you know before Christmas. So usually maybe second week of December. Some colleges also offer what's called early decision 2. So that if you don't get into your first choice college early decision 1, if you are either denied or deferred, you're now out of that agreement, and you can apply early decision 2 because those deadlines tend to be the first week of January, and they let you know usually in early February. So for example, let's just say that you love both Vanderbilt and Emory, and you love them equally. I know I'm getting off topic a little bit, but I think it's important to know. If I apply to Vanderbilt ED1 and I don't get in, let's say I get deferred, which means they will reconsider me in March. I'm no longer bound even if I get in, but Emory offers an ED2, and I love it as much as I love Vanderbilt, and I want to improve my chances at Emory, so I apply to Emory ED2, and I get in, I have to go. And by the way, once you get in ED2, you have to withdraw all your other applications. Okay, I think there was a question right here. We have some people right here in our learning center that are here live, so I think there was a question here.
I just ran across this early decision where it's binding the other day looking at How many schools are doing that?
There's quite a few schools. The question is, how many schools are doing early decision? More and more and more. And what we're seeing is that they're filling almost half their class, freshman class, early decision. That when you see that a particular college, let's say, has a 7% admit rate, that's really not a true number. Because if that college offers early decision, there's a very good chance that their early decision admit rate might be as high as 20%, which then means that the regular admit rate might only be 3%. So tremendous advantage for applying early decision in many cases, and you lose that advantage when you apply regular. But honestly, you only apply early decision if you are 100% positive, this is the college I really want to go to, and my parents can afford it, unless the college tells you that if you don't get the financial aid that you need, we will let you out of early decision. There are some colleges that will do that. Some questions have come in, which I'm going to attempt to answer, and then I'm going to try to move on because we have a lot to cover.
So would schools of UF, FSU think more highly of coalition applications? It's only 3 schools, or the common think more?
Okay, so the question is, will the colleges that are on the coalition application think more of you and give you a better shot if you applied on coalition? Because excuse me, only 3 of our colleges, state universities, are on coalition, but 9 of them are on common. Absolutely not. Colleges show absolutely no preference. It doesn't matter whether you use common application, coalition application, or if a college even has their own application. Does not matter. You do whatever works best for you.
Does UF have rolling admissions?
UF does not have rolling admission. You must apply by November 1st. And let me tell you another little secret. You must get your housing application in for UF within about 2 weeks of applying. It's before you know whether you're in or not. And you are going to give them a I believe it's still a $25 housing deposit, because they do not guarantee housing. And if you wait until you find out that you're in and then you put in your housing deposit, you're likely to either not get housing or not get the housing that you really want. Okay, they're the only university I know about that works that way, that wants the housing deposit that early.
Can you apply to multiple colleges as part of the early decision?
Okay, so can you apply to multiple colleges as part of early decision? No. Think of it this way. If I said yes, if I applied early decision 1, and by the way, Common App won't let you. It'll slap your hand. It doesn't let you pick early decision 1 for 2 colleges. But if somehow I managed to have 2 different Common applications, and I didn't tell my guidance counselor what I was doing, and I submitted one application to Emory for early decision, and I submitted another application to Vanderbilt for early decision, and they both said yes, I'm going to have to disappoint one of them. And no matter, basically, understand some colleges, many colleges talk to each other. They may find out what happened. Those are pretty much, those are overlap colleges. Kids who look at one school often look at both of them. And what you're going to do is, let's say that you turn down Emory, and just tell them that, you know, your parents just can't afford it. But somehow they can afford Vanderbilt, which is probably about the same price. And if Emory finds out that this wasn't really a legitimate answer, in future years, the kids from your high school who apply to Emory probably will get turned down. Okay, we have one question that's here in live audience, and then I'll move on. Okay, so the question is, well, what if you haven't written your essay yet? If you are applying early to a college that doesn't require an essay, well, then you're fine. However, I can tell you that UF, FSU, and UCF all require a minimum of 1 essay. UCF requires more than the others, and you cannot apply without the essay. You can't even press submit. It will not let you. Now, you could probably fill it up with X's, but I'm not sure what that college would think of you, other than being a procrastinator or not reading instructions. Okay, let's move on. The next thing that complicates application to the state universities is the SSAR, the Self-Reported Student Academic Record. If you apply to any of these 7 state universities, you do not send an official transcript. So you might say, oh, great, I don't have to spend money on a transcript. That's one less thing I have to do. There is the equivalent of an online transcript. It's a self-reported record. It's sort of like this matrix that you have to fill in. You must have your transcript in front of you. Do not do it without your transcript. where you must list every high school course you took, even if you took them in middle school, even if they're not core, exact name of college, so you have, of course, so you have to copy it from your transcript, when you took it first or second semester, what grade you got first or second semester. You have to submit it, and that's only honestly after you and mom and dad check it. And then you have to link it to your actual application. And you get back, and when you submit it, you'll get, you know, an ID number, and it's that ID number that gets linked into the application. If you are, let's say you go to Florida, you know, you're Florida Gulf Coast, you get in, you're delighted, you're going to go there. At that point, you send your official transcript. And by the way, when you send the official transcript, just like when you send the official score, if it doesn't agree with what you told them when you first applied, you might be in a little bit of hot water. So you have to be 100% accurate. And I would strongly urge any student who is filling out the SSAR to have mom or dad or brother or sister or somebody else there and sort of reading off with you, checking off, and then when the whole thing is done, 2 people checking it to make sure that you didn't leave something out. And at this point, we're actually ready to get into, you know, a whole discussion about what does it really take to get into some of these, you know, individual state universities, and what are some new things that are happening on campus? What are they known for? And trying to differentiate for you about the state universities. So first, I want to tell you about the sizes of them. This year, they did not release their total enrollment figures. These are undergraduate enrollment figures. But you can see that we go from really teeny tiny, like New College over on the west coast of Florida and Florida Poly, and, you know, schools that are maybe about 1,000 kids, all the way up to UCF. And I can tell you that UCF's number is actually much higher than this now. When I put this together, it was about 57,000 undergraduate students, the largest state university in Florida and the second largest state university in the country. But they just opened up a campus in downtown Orlando in partnership with Valencia College. And there are, I believe, roughly 7,500 students who just started there last month. So that number is another 7,500 higher. And with that, we're going to start getting in individual colleges, and I am going to be taking them in alphabetical order. So we start with FAMU, and this is the breakdown summer and fall. Most of our state universities allow you to apply either summer or fall. And for almost all of them, you're going to see that the numbers are easier or lower, and basically easier to get in the summer. And the reason they do this is because in order to graduate from a state university in Florida, you do have to spend 1 summer at any one of our state universities. It could be home at FAU, it doesn't matter. But it is a lot more fun to spend a summer on a college campus than it is boring home in Boca Raton or Palm Beach or wherever it may be. And by the way, you can apply for fall and be accepted for summer. It's unusual to apply for summer and be accepted for fall. And the big surprise is that some colleges will accept you for spring. And you have to find something else to do for first semester if you decide to accept their offer. Most of our colleges also have an honors program. In some cases, you actually have to apply for it. In other cases, it's automatic. Some let everyone apply. Some, you know, as I said, you have to be invited. So to get into the honors program at FAMU, you have to be invited to apply, but these are the minimum numbers for a student to be invited. And yes, there are definitely advantages for honors programs. They don't all work the same, but they usually mean that for your first 2 years, a couple of your classes each semester are much smaller, that the only students in your class are honors program students, that you may have better housing. In fact, you may all be living in the same residence hall, and you may even have some of the professors who are considered, oh my God, that's the guy to get. Okay. And a few miscellaneous facts about FAMU, starting with the fact that it's located in Tallahassee, and it is the only city in Florida that has 2 state universities, because FSU is also up there. It is incredibly generous scholarship-wise, and it is our only historically Black State University in Florida. And actually one of the top ones in the nation. Their marching band is quite famous. It has performed in many national venues, including things like inaugural parades and Super Bowls. And then moving around the corner from where we are right now to FAU in Boca. And the numbers for summer and fall admission. And again, these are all numbers that are in that original handout that you could download or email us for. And again, you can see easier to get in the summer than in the fall. And their honors program on the main campus here in Boca has these minimum requirements, and you will get an automatic invitation to join the honors program if you meet the requirements. But otherwise, you can certainly apply for it if you're close. And finally, there is another campus of FAU which you can also apply to, which is the Wilkes Honors College up in Jupiter. And you can see that those numbers are pretty high. They did not have, by the way, current ACT numbers this year or last year. So these are the ACT numbers from 2017. They would be a bit higher now. And one of the very, very cool things about the honors program or the honors campus is that it's a great place for a student who is pre-med, because they share space with two research facilities, Scripps Research Institute and Max Planck, which are both up there on the FAU campus.
Can you clarify if these GPAs are weighted or unweighted?
Okay, every GPA that I am showing you not only is weighted, but it is using the recalculation I showed you. So this 4.15 is not your weighted GPA on your transcript. It's the recalculated GPA. And again, that is likely to be lower than the GPA, the weighted GPA on your transcript. FAU several years ago started a double degree med program. In fact, started two of them. And these have become increasingly popular for students who are thinking about going to medical school, because it can save them the horrors of going through the medical school application process, which, trust me, is about 20 times worse than going through the college application process. I do med school admissions work as well. And I can tell you that whereas your kids might apply to 8, 10, 12 universities right now out of high school, when they apply to med school, it's not usual to apply to 25 or more. And there are a lot more essays in med school admissions, and some of which have to be done in just 2 weeks' time. So I've got a child who is 100% positive that she wants to be a physician, and who is a fabulous, fabulous student. These double degree med programs, which are highly competitive, may be for you to think about. So there's two of them at FAU, one on the main campus and one on the honors campus. They work in very, very similar ways. Like there's a question that came in.
Prefer non-state applicants.
I can't, the question is whether or not Wilkes prefers non-state applicants. I can't tell you that any of our state universities prefers an out-of-state applicant, because all of our state universities have a relatively small out-of-state population. I honestly don't know whether that is like limited by the Board of Governors that oversees our state universities, or it just works out that way. But I'd say most of our state universities may have between 5 and 10% out-of-staters. I think New College is one of the exceptions. So I can't answer the question as to whether they prefer an out-of-stater, other than the fact that the out-of-stater brings in a lot more money, because the tuition is very, very reasonable for all of our state universities at, I think, just under $7,000 a year. Anyway, just to give you an idea of what it takes to get into either one of the double degree BSMD programs, which, by the way, takes 7 years at our two state universities. Normally, if you were doing these things separately, 4 years of undergrad, 4 years of med school, so you are saving a year. But based on the fact that you have to have at least a 4.3 recalculated weighted core GPA of 4.3, and SAT score of 1490 or ACT of 33 to even qualify for consideration, you can see that this is going to be very competitive. And in fact, 2 SAT subject tests are recommended, which means you take them, but FAU doesn't require a subject test for anyone else. And basically they're looking for very strong evidence that you will become a fabulous doctor based on some of the things that you're currently doing. And the application is a bit more complicated. Yes, you can start off with the common application, but you're writing some additional essays, you're sending recommendation, you're sending, you're doing an interview if you're invited for it. And by the way, most programs that involve med school are open only to U.S. citizens and permanent residents. So I believe that, well, at least this one I'll say, you definitely have to be a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident in order to get into this particular program. And it is conditional admission, and it usually is. So the COM is the College of Medicine, because you have to maintain a certain GPA while you're at FAU. And MCAT is the medical college admission test. Let's say it's the medical school equivalent to the SAT, except that it carries a lot more weight. You prep for a lot longer, and typically you take it only once. And there are some double degree med programs for which you don't have to take the MCAT, but for those colleges that require you to take the MCAT, you usually just have to score at about the average level for that university. You don't have to get like a super high score. So you may not be spending months and months preparing for it. FAU also has what's called a direct admit nursing program, which is also highly competitive. If you look at the numbers of what it takes as a minimum requirement to get in, these numbers are relatively, higher than the normal FAU numbers. Nursing programs have become increasingly difficult to get into. And they also have completely different deadlines when it comes to FAU. And as you know, so many colleges are always under construction. So there is considerable construction going on sort of at the back of the FAU campus. And this is a building that is opening up in December. It is the Schmidt Family Complex. And not only is it for academics, but also for athletics. And the facilities will be so state of the art that FAU believes that it will attract world-class athletes, and that their athletic program will be the equivalent of not only our top state universities, but many of the top state universities in the college where you're tuning in to watch their games all the time. And a few different miscellaneous facts about FAU. They do have one of the largest business schools in the nation. And at the graduate level, they have been rated as having the third best MBA in sports management, which has become an incredibly hot major for kids. And this year, they actually enrolled 24 national merit finalists. So these are kids who had like outrageously high scores, not only on the PSAT, but on the SAT or ACT as well. And they do have 6 campuses, but most of us know the campus here, in Boca Raton, as well as the Wilkes Honors College. But you can see that there are 4 additional campuses, and very, very, very research oriented. And so we're now taking a trip across the state over to Fort Myers to look at Florida Gulf Coast. You can see the summer and fall numbers. The acceptance rates were the same for summer and fall, but the numbers are a bit different. And again, easier to get in the summer, but not easy, just easier. And their honors program, which is an automatic invitation to the honors program if you meet their requirements, but you could be invited to apply. So the campus has grown over the years. It's almost 800 acres. And I can tell you that Florida Gulf Coast got put on the map essentially in 2013 when it beat one of the best basketball teams in the entire country. It upset number 2 seed Georgetown in the Sweet 16. So it has become an incredibly, incredibly popular college. In fact, Atlantic Monthly, right after that, wrote, "This is the hottest school in the country right now. It's even better than you would expect. The school is built on a swamp. Baby alligators can be seen along the school's long network of boardwalks, and one of the dorms is a stone's throw away from the beach." And here it is. So this is North Lake Village. It's a man-made lake, but look at it. It's got a fire pit and hammocks and sand volleyball and a pool and tennis and dining and a boardwalk. I mean, and you're living in apartment-style housing. And upper-class housing also is like apartment style. I mean, if you want to go to college and feel like you're living at the Ritz-Carlton, Florida Gulf Coast is the place. And speaking of something like the Ritz-Carlton, where they have fabulous golf. If you're a golfer, I mean, you can major in PGA golf management at Florida Gulf Coast. It's one of the few colleges in the country that offers that. Event management is another very hot major for them. And they've also just added construction management and supply chain management. So athletics are really huge there, and so is Greek life. They are, in some sense, I would say, a smaller version of, a UF or an FSU or UCF, just being, becoming a very, very spirited, rah-rah environment with excellent academics, but a social life to match. And there is also a tremendous emphasis on internships and what's called service learning. Service learning is where you're taking a class, but that also has a community service component to it. I'll be coming back to that in a few minutes. Okay, so Florida International, we're going to see a lot of figures coming up for Florida International. I'm going to just tell you, don't try to memorize any of these numbers or even write them down. There is a calculator on the Florida International website that if you put in your GPA and your scores, it's going to tell you if it looks like you're sort of within the range to be admitted and whether you can be admitted to summer or fall. Although they don't call summer, they call it early fall. Not sure why, but okay. So here's their honors program. But for instance, if you apply for early fall, which everyone else calls summer, actually they call it summer B. Our state universities also have a summer A. If you're in high school, you can't go to summer A because you're still in high school. So summer B starts a couple of weeks after graduation and ends a couple of weeks before school starts in the fall, and where you take just 2 courses. But if you have, for example, a 3.3 GPA, and that's core recalculated, weighted, and you have an ACT of 22, you're automatic, you're getting it. It's automatic. You still have to go through the application process, but they basically have these numbers that are minimums. If you have this GPA and test score, you can get in. So these are the numbers, based on your GPA, that automatic admission for summer B. So you can see, for example, if I have a lower SAT or ACT score, I needed a higher GPA. And they have similar numbers for the fall, but you can see that the fall numbers from 3.5 to 3.8 are higher than the automatic numbers from summer from 3.2 to 3.6. So automatically in if you meet those minimums. But as I said, don't look to memorize them. Just know that FIU is the one school that has these, and that you can go online and put your numbers in. And yes, you can even get into spring with a 2.9 and a 1070. Question has come up. Okay, so our state universities do not publish. The question is, are these numbers the same for out of state as they are for in-state? Our state universities do not publish separate numbers for in-state and out-of-state, and most state universities don't. They give you a set of numbers. For most of our state universities, no matter where they are, it is generally a little bit harder to get in if you are out of state. Because for most of our state universities, and there's only 2 that I can think of that are different, there are far more in-staters than there are out-of-staters. The 2 exceptions are University of Delaware, because, who lives in Delaware, right? So there's about 2/3 out-of-staters and 1/3 in-staters. And I believe University of Vermont is the other one where there are more out-of-staters than in-staters. But generally speaking, let's say I'm looking at the numbers for a University of Michigan, which is one of the tougher state universities in the country to get into. If I'm an out-of-state student, I don't want to be at the midpoint of the range. I want to be at the top of the range. If I'm an in-stater, I can be more in the middle of the range or just below the middle of the range. So that's as much as I can tell you in terms of whether these numbers are for in-state or out-of-state. They're for everyone. So FIU, as most of you know, is in Miami. There are 2 Miami campuses, but they also have a couple of other campuses, including doing hospitality management in China, which I think is pretty cool. Again, another really research-oriented university. And I can tell you from the new rankings from US News and World Report that just came out last week, they are ranked number 2 in the entire nation in international business. So if you have an interest in international business and you want to stay in state, I can't tell you it's better than anyone else's international. I can only tell you that it is ranked number 2, which means it's, reputation is way up there. And this is a school that is incredibly diverse. It is almost 70% Hispanic. And my understanding is that it awards more bachelor's and master's degrees to Hispanic students than any other college in the country. Oh, that one says what? There's only 3% are from out of state there. So this is a super cool place as we move into Florida Poly. This is definitely our newest school. And what you see in front of you is not the Starship Enterprise, for those of you who are Trekkies like I am, but it certainly looks like the Starship Enterprise. This is their IST building, the Innovation, Science, and Technology building. This is their main academic building. It's huge, and it has everything in there, from classrooms to meeting rooms to library and dining facilities, even residential facilities. In fact, if you're driving along, I think it's the I-4 corridor, which is sort of the high-tech corridor, and you see something that looks like a spaceship, it's Florida Poly. They do not have summer admission, and I can tell you that they have gotten considerably more competitive since they have opened just a few years ago. And the question comes up now, well, who are the kids who go here? And these are the kids who are like self-starters, the techies. This is the kid who's going to walk around with a t-shirt that says robotics is my sport. And they did just graduate their first class a year ago, so they are really new. Okay. This is what the entrance to their building looks like. And as I take you inside, I can show you, this is a classroom. This is State University. Look how tiny the classroom is. And they have the most interesting laboratories. Their library is unique. Do you know that their library has no books? And in fact, it was featured on Jeopardy. What university has a library with no books? So what is Florida Polytech? And finally, their degrees are all industry-oriented tech degrees. Their curriculum has been designed by industry experts, very hands-on, very lab-oriented, internships and co-ops. A co-op is more of an extended internship. Kids can start taking classes in their major as early as freshman year. And I would say that, this is really, it's all STEM and all interesting degree programs that prepare kids for amazing careers in like high-tech, state-of-the-art fields. So the 3 of the fields here, and then there are 3 additional fields, and all of these fields have sub-majors within them. So these are things, personally, I probably don't even understand all of them, but if you have a super techie kid, your kid is going to understand what some of these things are. Okay, so there is also new construction there. They are building their 2nd academic building. They've already broken ground for it. It's 85,000 square feet. And this is what it's going to look like. So again, they are keeping with that very high-tech, slick, ultra-modern, clean look. And I'm going to pause to see if there's any questions before I get into FSU. I am going to get into the rankings of engineering programs and business programs in just a couple, in a few minutes. To the best of my knowledge, there is absolutely no ranking in computer science per se. But I would tell you that if a small university really interests your child, and I would really look at Florida Polytech in terms of its computer science, but you will see computer science is offered in almost all of our, if not all of our state universities.
So would the school be more likely to have lower acceptance requirements for out-of-state applicants since they pay more tuition? Maybe why they don't break those numbers out of the overall.
So the question is, wouldn't it make more sense for them to have lower, requirements for out-of-state students? The answer is no. Their primary mission is to serve the students of Florida and to provide, in this case, 12 outrageously fabulous alternatives, all very different from each other, to support our students and to let in some out-of-state students. You know what? It's no different if you look at the University of California system. There are 9 universities in that, UCLA, Berkeley, Santa Barbara, Irvine, they also have incredibly small out-of-state population, 5–10%. I think Berkeley is the biggest with about 10%, maybe a little bit more, but it is definitely harder for an out-of-stater to get in to the state universities in California. It is the same if a Florida kid is looking to get into Indiana University, University of Wisconsin, University of Texas. For example, University of Texas, there's a law in Texas that if you are in the top 6% of your graduating class in Texas, you must be admitted to the University of Texas. What has happened is that there's only room now for 6% out-of-state kids. So University of Texas is a super cool place. It's a fabulous campus. It's in the middle of the state capital. It's an incredibly young, vibrant music city, a fun place to go. Florida kids love it because it's good weather. It's easy to get to. You don't feel like you're that far away. Okay, you're a different time zone. So it's highly, highly competitive. And therefore, the Florida kids in general will have higher grades, test scores, perhaps, and other holistic information that makes them a great candidate for University of Texas, especially the honors program of business. Okay, let me move to FSU. I may start by telling you I'm a little bit prejudiced here. I almost share with you, this is the first time I'm really publicly sharing it, an honor that was recently bestowed upon me. Florida State University has just formed its inaugural Admissions Advisory Board. And to the best of my knowledge, 7 college counselors were invited to join the board. 6 of them work in public or private schools. 1 of them is independent, and that's me. I was invited to join the board, and I will be flying up there for homecoming weekend. And next semester, I will be flying to their Valencia, Spain campus to learn more about it. So I'm incredibly, incredibly excited. But I don't think I have any more information about FSU than I do about any of the other schools. Anyway, FSU, you can see summer, fall, again, easier to get in the summer, but certainly not easy. They have a little bit different requirement in terms of their honors program. You will be invited to apply if you meet, basically, you know, if you get a scholarship, if you get a out-of-state tuition fee waiver, or you're a national merit semifinalist. And the average of what the kids look like this year in FSU, pretty high numbers in terms of their honors program. So I quoted the director of admissions several years ago. I still use her quote. She said that basically if you have D's or F's on your transcript, even if you've made them up, it's the kiss of death. That doesn't mean you won't get in, but it doesn't look very favorable. So I'd shown you these numbers before. These are the minimum requirements to get into an SUS, State University System school. However, the typical admit for FSU had considerably higher numbers. So for example, let's just pick math. We know you need 4 years of math to graduate high school. So that could be Algebra 1, Algebra 2, geometry, and let's say pre-calculus. The average admit to FSU has 5.5 years. So what does that mean? That means that, let's say roughly half the kids have 5 years and half the kids have 6 years. So that typically means that the students either have 1 year of calculus or 2 years of calculus, or they have 1 year of calculus with 1 year of statistics, and typically AP. Okay. So this is when I talk about rigor or natural science. You know, they want to see biology, physics, and chemistry. That takes care of 3 of them, but it's 4.5. So what they're really saying is that some of these kids have 1 more year of biology, physics, and chemistry, AP, or might have 2 more years of it. And by the way, kids who are in the IB program would automatically have these kinds of numbers. And of course, if you go to a school that doesn't give AP or IB, then it would basically be the most rigorous that you would have to have our audience.
Their possible 7th and 8th grade if they were taking.
Yes. So the question is, do these numbers include 7th or 8th grade in case you were taking, for instance, many of our students took, let's say, Algebra 1 and geometry in 7th and 8th grade. So yes, and I would say that these are the kids who really still need math every year because they're probably very accelerated like math. And let's face it, you don't have to write any papers, you don't have to read very much. I mean, why do you think I was a math major in college? Okay, so FSU had a 19% increase in applications, over 60,000 applications. It was the largest freshman class that they have ever admitted with 6,800, just over 6,800 kids. That may mean they'll be more competitive next year because it was a bigger class than they had anticipated. And they did enroll at least one student from every single county in Florida. And when I wrote down here 60% yield, what that really means is that 60% of the accepted kids said yes back to FSU. Colleges like to be popular. And the higher the yield, the more popular they are, the happier your student body, the more motivated they are, the higher the morale. So this is a really high number. Many colleges only have a 20 or 30% yield. So the biggest change for FSU this year was to move to a single deadline of just November 1st. They accept 3 applications, Common, Coalition, and their own. So it depends where else you're applying as to which one you use, but many of our kids will just do the Common app because of 840 colleges. And remember, it's a self-reported academic record. It's even self-reported SAT and ACT scores. And FSU does ask you to upload a resume up to 2 pages. It's not a requirement, but basically when they ask you to do something, it means you do it. And just to dispel what we mean by a resume, because there's a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of information that kids may get that's not exactly accurate. So your resume does not necessarily, or let me say does not, have your GPA, your class rank, your AP courses, your AP or IB scores. It doesn't have your future career goals. All those things are on your application. It is an activity resume. So what's an activity? It's a school activity. It's a synagogue or church activity. It's a personal activity. It's work. It's internship. It could be taking care of a sick relative. It is, okay, it's not hanging out with your friends. Okay, it's not Snapchatting with your friends. But it could be e-games. So what they're looking for is a detailed resume. So think about you as an adult going out looking for a new job. You don't just list the places that you work. You wouldn't just say, well, gee, I worked at Score at the Top Learning Center. You would then have bullets that might say that help 30 plus students each semester achieve higher grades, and you'd have several bullets to show off what you had accomplished. What was the impact of the work that you did? Well, that's what an activity resume really is. It can be up to 2 pages, unlike a work resume where they tell you, like, especially if you're first out working, your first few years, to just have a work resume that's only 1 page. You can go up to 2 pages, but it has really good detail. If you're in Mu Alpha Theta and you compete in math competitions, we want you to list a couple of your top finishes. Let's say you didn't have any top finishes, at least indicate that you competed on the calculus team or that you competed individually in statistics. They want details. Basically, colleges are, and this is what we mean by holistic information, colleges are trying to accept kids who they think are going to someday change the world. Well, how do they know if you're going to change the world? Look at your little world now in high school. How have you changed it? They don't want couch potatoes when they come to their campus. They want kids who are going to be engaged in different activities. They look for long-term commitment. They look for leadership. They look for initiative. Anyway, FSU also has another campus in Panama City. It's only been open about 20 years now. It's very small, about 1,000 kids. You're actually still an FSU student. They don't have housing, but you can see from the numbers that it's much easier to get into. Now, there is a back door into FSU, sort of, and it's called the Seminole Pathways Program. And you apply to FSU, and you have to be accepted, but you're not accepted to start on the Tallahassee campus. You're accepted to start either at Panama City or internationally or at a community college for a transfer. And the international option could either be a first semester or a first year option. And so I'm giving you the website here of if you want more information about it, or you could just Google FSU pathways and you'll get to this website. But what do these kids look like academically? Well, this is current data. These are the kids who got in this year who were invited to start FSU as part of the pathway program. So you can see that these numbers are lower than, like for instance, this is like 3.8 to 4.0. Let's back up. Or actually, I don't have to back up. I can just look at my cheat sheet. To get into FSU for summer, it was 3.7 to 4.3 was the mid 50%. You can see these numbers are lower. These are the kids who are almost at the level of getting into FSU. And so if you're okay with starting, let's say your first year, first semester in Valencia, Spain, hey, more power to you. Do your first semester or year abroad and then come to the FSU campus. You may ask why they're doing this. And by the way, they're not the only school that does this. Northeastern does it, for example. There are kids who drop out after one semester or 1 year. And so they have beds to fill. So these are the kids who are sort of standing by waiting to take that bed. There's another first year abroad program. It's not the pathway program, and it's confusing because it's also in the same places and it's a first year abroad program. But if you'd like to do your study abroad your first year instead of later on, you can be accepted first to FSU, and then you can apply for a full year of study in London, Florence, Panama City. This is Panama City, Panama, not Panama City, Florida, or Valencia, Spain. And there's also a website with more information about that. But these are just regular FSU students who met the regular admission requirements, but who'd like to get started studying abroad. So a few miscellaneous facts. FSU, I'm incredibly proud, jumped 13 spots in U.S. News and World Report. Now, I don't want you to think just because they're number 57 means that they are the 57th best national university in the country. This does not mean best. I tend to ignore rank. I look at U.S. News and World Report a lot because it's an easy place for me to compare admit rates or SAT scores in just a few minutes' time. But this impacts a college's prestige. It makes it look like, oh my God, it's more desirable to go here because you jumped up so much. So what's that going to do? It's going to get more kids to apply. And when more kids apply, they're going to become more selective. They can't accept more. So they're going to still be looking for, the best and the brightest, which means their rank will go up even more the following year, which is how a number of colleges have improved their rank significantly over the years. And by the way, I think that FSU is amazingly well known for, their performing arts and for creative writing. I think that they do an absolutely outrageous job with their kids who are looking to be performers or creative writing. And then this is one brand new thing about FSU. They are the largest university ever to add a graduation requirement, which is called experiential learning, which basically means it's hand-on learning. And it's to improve your success once you leave FSU. So that there will be a requirement that you either do an internship or research or international study or, any of these 5 things that I have listed. This will be starting a year from now, I believe, blended into their graduation requirements. I think we're going to wind up seeing more and more of this from other schools. So before I get into new college, I think there was a question here.
It's kind of a dumb question, but like when you say the study abroad program, they have this place in Spain. Is that a campus?
Okay. So the question is, when they have a study abroad program and that's in Spain, is that a campus? My understanding is yes, but ask me after April because I will be up there in early April to see it. But I believe it is their own campus. Okay. Is there another question there? Okay.
International kids do not have these kinds of GPAs. Is that taken into account?
So the question is, international kids do not have these kinds of GPAs. Is that taken into account? Well, it really depends upon where you're an international kid. For example, there are IB programs all over the world. And you could be in India, you could be in Brazil, but you could be in an IB school and you will have no problem getting grades like this. But then again, you might not be in an IB school. You might not even be in an American school. You might be in a school with a completely different curriculum. I can tell you that every student is evaluated in context. So even though you might not even have a GPA that's converted to a 4.0 scale, and in fact, if you're an international student, and have a different kind of a transcript with, I think it's my French students who are on a 20-point scale, although I don't think anybody really gets a 20, you don't actually do an SSAR, you actually do send your transcript. So you are evaluated in context, but if a college is saying, well, our average kid has about a 4.3 weighted, what they're really saying to you is this is a kid who is very close to straight A's, maybe has, let's say, oh, I don't know, 6, 8, 9 B's, and has taken the most, for one of our local, say, public schools, is either in an IB program or has, let's say, 7 or 8 AP courses, or ACE courses, because our state universities will treat ACE exactly the same as they treat AP. But I will tell you that not all universities treat ACE exactly the same way as AP. I know for a fact that the University of California system treats it differently, and so does the University of Southern California, which is a private university, in California. So you will be evaluated in the context of your school, and if you go to a school that doesn't give any APs or IB or ACE, basically, if you have taken the most rigorous courses at your school, and so if I look at something like, say, Oxbridge Academy, which gives, I think, senior seminars, if you have pushed yourself and you've been able to take some senior seminars, your GPA, is it going to be, a 4.3 or 4.7? The answer is no. But if you're one of the kids who's really shining at Oxbridge Academy, you're going to get into some of our more competitive state universities because they will evaluate you in the context of the school to which you go.
How does FSU look at an applicant with test scores that are much higher than average, but with a GPA which is much lower?
So the question is, how does FSU, and I'm going to broaden that to say, how does any college look at you if you have outrageously high SAT scores, but not such a hot GPA? So I've got people I'm working with privately right now who is about a 3.2, 3.1 GPA, but has about a 1500 SAT. What does it say to the college? Hello, I'm a slacker. I don't turn in my work, or I don't study for tests, but I'm really super smart, so you should take me anyway. No. The most important factor in college admission for 98% of the kids is the academic record. By far, it is the courses you take and the grades you get, and the upward trend. And in fact, next week I'll be doing a presentation specifically on that, and you'll see the date and time it's coming up at the end of this. A high score does not make up for low grades. Sorry. Is there another question?
Whether FSU prefers kids in art, field, theater, or dance.
Okay, so the question is, does FSU prefer kids from the arts fields, from theater, from dance? I'm not going to say that they prefer them, but I will tell you that there is an audition process. I believe that there is a separate application, and that you must be accepted to both the main FSU and to the specific arts program for which you are applying. It's just that FSU has a wonderful reputation for its performing arts, and so it is really competitive. You've got to have the academics, and you've got to be able to sing and dance. Let me move on, and then I'll answer some more questions. Let's take a look at New College, also on the west coast of Florida. This is the equivalent of a private liberal arts college. It is very, very different. Even different, I would say, from FAU Honors College here on the East Coast. So you can see some pretty high numbers for the GPA, and some pretty good numbers for the SAT and ACT. They were not able to yet give us their number for full admission, so this is their number, 61%. Only the acceptance rate is from last year. So it's not so new. I'm not sure I would still call it New College. It is the smallest of our state universities. It has no core requirements for graduation. They do not give you grades. There's a huge focus on undergraduate research, small classes, very independent study. You're writing a senior thesis. They have a shopping period, much like, well, there are some small, pretty selective liberal arts colleges that have shopping periods. Sarah Lawrence is one of them outside of New York City, where you can try a course out for 2 weeks, and if you don't like it, goodbye, I'm out of here. This one does have more out-of-staters than the others, and again, it is more like a small private liberal arts college, only 18% out of state. That's very high for a state university in Florida. It has had some funny recognitions, like the #1 nerdiest college. They also have a Quidditch club and a radical cheerleading club. The one I think is really the best on here is that they are a member of there's a book called Colleges That Change Lives. These are smaller, typically liberal arts colleges that totally change the life of, let's say, the B, maybe even a B, well, let's just say the B student. They're not necessarily your most well-known universities, but it's a phenomenal book. The author is Lauren Pope. It comes out, I want to say, every couple of years. A new college is featured in that book, Colleges That Change Lives. They are one of the best feeder schools for kids getting into elite law schools, med schools, business schools. Wall Street Journal has written them up that way. And now moving on to UCF, under construction forever, although I'm not talking that much about its construction other than downtown. Again, its numbers, summer and fall. I mean, look at that. Fall, only 38% of the kids got in who applied for fall, but 2/3 of the kids who applied for summer got in. They also have an honors program where you have to be invited to apply, but you can request an application, and it's actually the Burnett Honors College. Rolling admission, and this is I think our most competitive rolling admission state university in Florida. Definitely the earlier you apply, the better. The longer you wait, the harder it is to get in. And I know some kids are saying, well, I'd really rather go to X or Y first, so let me see if I get into them, and then if I don't get into them, I'll apply to UCF. Don't, because there's a chance you might not get in. They have a special admission program called Top 10 Nights, and that if you are in the top 10% of your class in a school that ranks students or that gives percentiles, and you have pretty much average SAT or ACT scores, you are guaranteed admission. Not necessarily for the fall, it could be for the summer or for the spring, but you do have to apply by January the 15th. They also, like FAU, have a double degree med program. It's an 8-year program, and you can see again, very high. Now, this is an unweighted GPA, so I actually wrote the word unweighted on here because all the other GPAs I've been talking about have been weighted. So this is a kid who has 80% A's and 20% B's, and trust me, this is a kid with plenty of AP courses or the most rigorous courses that are, available to him at school. And it is a more complex application process because basically, as you can see, it's several different applications, but it guarantees you going to med school. And the profile of the kids who applied and got in, based on the kids who enrolled last year, this year's numbers were not immediately available, but I was told that they're very similar to last year's. You can see the average GPA of 4.58. So that's really your straight A kid that's in an IB program or full-on AP or or ACE, and amazingly high SAT and ACT scores. And only 35 kids are in that program from last year. So, by the way, this is true of any BSMD program around the country. There are a number of them. And these are the same kids who are getting into Harvard, Yale, and Princeton. But going back to regular UCF admission, a weighted GPA of 3.67, I'd say is a B to B plus student with a number of very rigorous courses. This is not necessarily your straight A student. So I don't want you to think that all these programs are for the top students. Okay, so UCF is incredibly well known for the Rosen College of Hospitality Management. It is not on the main campus, and I'd say UCF is probably one of the best schools in the entire country to go to if you're interested in hospitality management. I mean, what better place? Orlando, vacation capital of America. an amazing number of hotel rooms, restaurants, just fabulous places for the kids to intern and get pretty amazing experiences. Look at that, 5,300 restaurants, almost 200 golf courses. And they have a number of majors. And even if you're not a major in one of these fields, some of them you can actually even minor in. You could be, I could be a computer science major on the main campus, but I might also be doing event management. And so that Rosen campus is about a half an hour from the main campus, and there are shuttles of close to a dozen times a day that go back and forth between the two campuses. And a Rosen student can live on either campus. So look, for instance, if you want UCF and don't want to be with 50 some odd thousand kids and want to be in a smaller environment, and you love Orlando and you're interested in anything related to the event management or, basically hospitality management, live on the Rosen campus. You're going to feel like you're in a much smaller public university. You still have all the rah-rah of UCF, but in a much smaller environment. So under construction forever, the downtown campus did just open with 7,700 kids, and basically majors related to the industries that are very close by to the campus. And there is housing in a high-rise residence hall downtown. A couple of miscellaneous facts. I was surprised, I just found this one out, that they are the #1 supplier of graduates to the U.S. aerospace and defense industries, and that they have a cyber defense team that won the U.S. Department of Energy's competition last year. They are just adding a brand new major that I don't know of any other school that has this, called Senior Living Management. So it combines hospitality with health management. And there was a lot of controversy over who is the NCAA football champion from 2017, because UCF claimed that they were, because they are I believe, the only school that was undefeated. And actually the NCAA did recently recognize them as they basically share the championship with, I think, the University of Alabama, although that's a professional team, isn't it? University of Alabama? Anyway. Question.
If you're admitted to UCF via enrollment conditions, will it affect your ability to get to UF, FSU? Will UF and FSU know?
There's a great question. If you apply to to UCF rolling admission, nice and early, you're just getting the application in this week, you'll find out in a few weeks, you'll find out, let's say sometime early October, that you're in. Will UF and FSU? No. And will it impact your admission decision there? The answer is no to both questions. No way to know. And while it's true their directors of admission might be good friends with each other, trust me, even if they were sharing names, and I doubt that they are at this stage of the admission process, getting into one has absolutely no bearing on whether or not you will get into the other. They're completely independent processes. Yes.
This is a general question. So I've seen the summer as an option a lot.
Yes.
People.
Summer is an option a lot.
As a regular, deadline.
Right.
Are they accepted to summer?
Okay. Great question.
Okay.
So all the applications that offer summer will ask students, do they prefer summer or do they prefer fall? And the university's first choice is to, if they can, if they're going to be accepted, to accept them to the term to which they apply. But there will be plenty of kids who apply for fall who are offered summer, because they feel that these are kids who need a little bit more of a foundation, perhaps. Personally, I think it's much better to start in the summer. I would rather go in the summer when the university is smaller, not as overwhelming, get 2 courses with priority registration under my belt, hopefully get 2 A's. But I am talking to the upper class students who are there. It's not just freshmen. Lots of kids are there for the summer. I am going to find out what sorority I should pledge, where are the cool places to hang out on campus, what are the good restaurants, what professors I should avoid. I'm going to learn everything I need to learn.
Okay.
I'm going to go home for a couple weeks. I'm going to come back when everybody else comes back in August to start school. I'm going to feel much less intimidated than any other freshman who hasn't been there in the summer, because I really know the lay of the land already.
So is it preferable then to maybe apply and say summer?
Yes, so you do apply, and when you apply, you can choose for a school like UF or FSU or UCF that offers, and most of our schools offer both summer and fall. I think there's 2 that don't. I think New College doesn't, and I think Florida Poly doesn't. I can say summer, and if I'm admissible, I will be admitted to summer. If I say fall, if I'm admissible, be possibly admitted to fall and be possibly admitted to summer, or I might even be admitted to spring, which means you have to do a gap program or take courses perhaps at Palm Beach State, or work or do an internship or community service or study somewhere for that first year. Okay.
Spring starts when?
Spring starts in January after Christmas break. Okay, University of Florida. Pretty much the highest GPAs that you'll see, the highest test scores that you'll see, pretty much almost identical admission for summer and fall in terms of grades and certainly for acceptance rate. UF has gotten harder to get into, which has the trickle-down effect of making everything else harder to get into. It has an honors program. I mean, those numbers are like ridiculously high. They have changed the way the application for honors works. It's part of the application. You say, it asks you the question, are you interested in honors? If you say yes, lo and behold, 2 extra essay questions open up above and beyond the personal statement. And by the way, in all of these honors programs, when I tell you the GPA and SAT or ACT, please don't think that that is what it takes to get into the honors program alone. It is also the holistic information. It is the extracurricular. It's essays if they were part of the application or part of the honors application. It's very holistic. It's not just the numbers. You have to have the numbers, but you also have to be a person who's engaged. Okay, so you can apply to either the common or the coalition, and they definitely, there's no slam dunks. The valedictorian with great scores, there's several, plenty of them that don't get in. And why don't they get in? They don't do extracurricular activities, or the way they explain their extracurricular activities was really very lackluster. You know, basically said, I'm in the key club and I do community service. You have to tell your whole story so that UF can really evaluate you. Very strict deadlines, and they want the SSAR submitted. That's that student, self-reported academic record. They want it submitted no later than December 1st. That housing application really soon. And if you're applying for any kind of financial aid, and by the way, I would say this is true for anything financial aid wise, financial aid process opens up in 2 weeks for all schools. You really want to get your financial aid forms in before the end of the year. And UF's admission decision will come out later this year than it has in any year prior. It used to come out the middle of February, the 2nd Friday in February. It now comes out the 4th Friday in February. And that's because they've had more and more applications. It takes longer to read them all. So within UF, there's a very special college experience called Innovation Academy. There's a question on the application asking if you want to be considered for Innovation Academy. And if you say yes, and if you're admitted to Innovation Academy, you cannot switch. So only say yes if this is a program that really appeals to you. It is a small college experience within UF. You don't go from August until May. Okay, you start in January. And you go for, for the summer term, and you go, you go for the spring term and the summer term. So you're basically going from January to August. In the fall, football season, you might be taking an online course, you might be studying abroad, doing internship, research. It's usually a few hundred kids each year. The first year that they started this, 2013, they had almost 200 freshmen. There's only a select number of majors. And this is all directly on their website. But the one really cool thing about any of these majors is that you all have the same minor. It's a minor in innovation. And you can see these minors are pretty different from each other. And that minor in innovation really, focuses on things like somebody who's very creative, who wants to be an entrepreneur, who's very ethical, project oriented. By the way, the kids do live on campus. It's regular on campus. It's very small classes. It was easier to get into Innovation Academy. Not easy, but easier. These average numbers are lower than the UF numbers. And so the most recent numbers I have, which are for this year, 290 students, 35% admit rate. It's actually the same admit rate that it was to UF, but it's a very self-selected group of kids. So before you have a child checking off, yes, I want to go to Innovation Academy, make sure they understand what it is. Because if you get in, that's where you're going. You can't say, oh, I made a mistake. I really want the main university. UF also has a completely online program. This is great for the kid who wants to go to UF, but needs to stay home. Maybe needs to stay home to take care of a grandmother, needs to stay home to work, a limited number of majors, but you can actually do a complete undergraduate program at UF online. There are other interesting programs that UF has. It is the oldest of our state universities. It's 2,000 acres. It has 1,000 buildings. They had a record number of applications this year, 42,000, but a freshman class of only 6,500. So you can see how competitive UF is. That doesn't mean 6,500 kids were admitted. Okay, UF did not publish its yield. So whether they had to admit, 13,000, well, you can figure it out. They had to admit that they admitted 35% of 42,000. And I think there were some questions here before I move on. Congratulations.
Pressure on my daughter. But I saw your Innovation Academy, which I had when I graduated. You had general sciences. This may be very specific, but is that like something like in veterinary
Yes.
programs?
Yes. If you're interested in animal science, that would be great if you wanted. If you're interested in veterinary medicine, animal science would probably be a great major.
And it's just smaller, they have smaller classes.
Yes, that's smaller classes, right? Because you're only in class with innovation. My understanding is you're only in class with innovation kids, and it may be 300 kids a year. So the whole Innovation Academy is what, 1,200 kids. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
How do you find out where you want to live, what course you want to live? You say you have to apply with it.
Okay. So when you apply for, you basically have just apply for housing. I don't think you specifically say, oh, I want to live in Hume. Just housing. Right, because it's priority, and I basically first in, first out, and you'll get, then you can look online and see what the different residence halls are.
If UF only accepting a certain percent from Palm Beach County and a certain percent from school.
Okay, so basically the question is are there limits within, say, UF in any school? Is it only a certain percentage within Palm Beach County, or a certain percentage within, I don't know, Spanish River or Suncoast or Moyer or Dreyfus? The answer is no. It's as many kids as are qualified, and don't let anybody tell you, oh, they only admit 10 kids for your school. No, no, no. They will admit as many kids who are qualified and as they can fit. Yeah. Yes.
This isn't school specific.
Okay.
The honors program I find very interesting.
Mhm.
I didn't have that out of school. I love the idea of the smaller classes. So, okay, my son isn't going to get into the honors program at UF, but he could get into an honors program at a lower scale school. Is this a better option?
Okay.
For him?
So the question is, am I better off at, let's say, a more prestigious state university, or at a less prestigious state university, but in the honors program? It's a very personal decision. And that's like basically saying to me, well, gee, if I get into the double degree med program at UCF, and I also get into Harvard, because it's the same kind of kid, where should I go? And half the kids will pick Harvard and half the kids will pick UCF. My personal belief is that I think the kids should go wherever they are comfortable and whatever makes them happy. And I tell kids it's not about prestige. And even though I'm the first to admit I'm an academic snob, I have to say that I learned everything from my son, Jason, who got into every college he applied to and decided to go to his safe school. And he went to the University of Denver, where he actually wound up getting a nice scholarship. And I think that he was incredibly, incredibly happy. And that, to me, is worth more than anything in the world. So it's whichever environment makes your son happier. And if he said, Mom, I can't handle these great big classes of, say, 200 or 300 kids, and I'd really rather be someplace where I have smaller classes, it made me, number one, look at the smaller state universities in Florida, Number two, look at the honors programs where, you know, where it looks like he has eligibility. UF claims that they don't read by major, but I do think that there are some majors that they do read by. I do believe that things like architecture and engineering and business are read by major. And I do think that for those majors, you really need to be much stronger in math.
You bring it all for
Oh, that's a great question. Guess what? You stumped me. You win. You win. I don't know. My guess is that you can't, but that honestly, don't take that for gospel. That is a great question. And I'm actually, if you email me that question, I promise to send it on to the admission counselor who is responsible for innovation to find out if I'm right.
Go ahead.
Okay, let me move on to University of North Florida up in Jacksonville. I think there's a pretty huge difference between summer and fall admission here. Even SAT scores and ACT scores don't even overlap. And actually neither does GPA, so huge difference between summer and fall. And they also have an honors program that you can apply to as part of the regular application. But basically, unless you're close to these numbers, I wouldn't suggest applying. I just found this one out too this week when I spoke to somebody who works at UNF, that they are one of the most friendly LGBTQ plus campuses anywhere. And they are known for these 6 programs, and transportation and logistics, I think is pretty cool, but I have to say in all my years of practice, I've never seen a kid want to apply to that. But there is no place in America where there are more crossroads. Essentially, there's I-95 and the Turnpike, both go north-south from here all the way up to probably Maine, I think, and they go through Jacksonville. I believe it is the I-10 that starts here on the East Coast in Jacksonville and goes all the way to California. It is one of the largest shipping ports in the world. There are train lines that go through here, trucks, buses, cars. I mean, transportation passes through here. And so if you're super interested in transportation and logistics, this may be one of the few places in the world that offers it. If you like the ocean, you're only 10 miles away, which is really pretty cool. And they have a really great exclusive relationship with Mayo Clinic, which is also in Jacksonville. So that's great if you're pre-med. And did you know that Jacksonville is actually considered the largest city in the continental US with 840 square miles? And brand new, it's part of the Coggin, and I think you might have heard the name Coggin because they're no plug here, but they're car dealers in this part of Florida. But the Coggin School of Business, there's a brand new center for entrepreneurship and innovation that had opened. And it's basically, some of it is going to work like Shark Tank, where if you got this great idea, you're going to be able to pitch it. But it's also where students can get involved in assisting local entrepreneurs. So from a business perspective, I think that's really pretty cool. And they claim that their graduates are more likely to get jobs in Florida than any other college. So I guess if you want to have your kids close by, send them to UNF. But if you want to have them move far away, maybe. Anyway, there are 3 Fortune 500 companies there. And the only other, I think, city in America that has 3 is Miami. Also, the Jacksonville area is incredibly, incredibly young. And there are plenty of jobs in the Jacksonville area. The military alone employs 50,000 people. Some are active duty and some are civilians, in Jacksonville. Jacksonville maybe is a little foreign to kids who are here in, southeastern Florida, but there's some pretty cool things up there. And now moving over to University of South Florida. And again, summer and fall numbers, as well as their honors program. And they have 3 campuses. And the St. Petersburg campus, not St. Petersburg, sorry, the Tampa campus is their main campus. But the St. Petersburg campus is really cool Because if you like downtown, if you like a city, and you also like the water, it is a very, very cool place to be. I don't know that much about Sarasota Manatee, other than the fact that it is also, quite small and very, very personalized. But in all cases, you are part of USF. So you basically have all that same, school spirit that you would have if you were on the main campus. I'd say there used to be more of a discrepancy between what it took to get into, the different campuses. It's gotten almost as hard now to get into St. Pete. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't know as much about Sarasota Manatee. And finally, they also have a double degree med program. You can see these are becoming pretty popular. I don't think theirs is quite as guaranteed, though, as UCF and FAU. Yes, there are minimums to get into it, but basically you don't apply for it out of high school. You only apply for it once you're there, and it starts in mid-April of your freshman year. And then there's another application that you actually have to do, a med school application as a sophomore and apply early decision, which is binding. But you can also see the kinds of grades the kids had once they were there, like 3.7, and also what they looked like when they were in high school. So again, it's going to be pretty much the top kids, and that MCAT score of 515 is just above average. About 510, 511 is the MCAT average, which runs from the 470s to almost 530. They also have they have a few different double degree programs. They have one in pharmacy, not nearly as hard to get into as the med one. They also have one in nursing, but this is another really cool one, LECOM, Lake Erie College of Medicine, for kids who are really interested in the double degree program. This is, I don't want to say a backdoor, but it almost is, because it is one of the less competitive double degree med programs that exists. And they also have one for dentistry. And finally, it's number 10 in the nation and 13 in the world for patents. It's like, wouldn't you think that other schools that are more prestigious might be that high? But look at the ones that are rated above them in terms of the number of patents. And, it's just interesting to me that many kids who I see will be looking at only certain schools within the Florida State University system. And it's if they only know 3 or 4 of them exist. And now you're learning about all these great things about so many of the other colleges, and our kids. I just hope that they more and more realize how phenomenal the opportunities are here in Florida. Okay, so now for one in Alabama, and we are at the end of our alphabet. Well, it's not quite Alabama, but it is in Pensacola. It does have, I would say, it's the least competitive in admission. One of their numbers is from summer. But you can see it's, pretty much at least half of the kids, who apply. And they did not give a mid 50% range, so I have no idea what it is, but their averages are below what we've seen a lot of other numbers be. And even their honors program is below. They are very great in terms of working with what we call bubble candidates. Kids who are aren't sure whether they're admissible or not. And they're excuse me, super friendly. You can call, you can ask, and they'll help you, and they'll tell you what you need to get in if they feel you're not admissible. And actually about half of their freshmen get academic scholarships based on their grades and scores, which I think is cool. So they are our only state university in a different time zone. And something brand new that I also just found out this week is that they have a program called Argos for Autism. More and more colleges have special support programs for kids who are on the spectrum to help not just with, the academic skills that a student with, let's say, learning or attentional issues might have, but basically to also help with the social skills and life skills and career planning. And honestly, I only just found this out this week, and I was very excited to share this with you. And they have been selected as the host of some national conference. Well, it's called the National Conference on Undergraduate Research in 2022. So it means that the research there is really super strong. It's a really cool place in the sense that it is enormous acreage wise. There's a nature preserve, there's biking trails, there's hiking trails. You've got the beach nearby and just lots of recreational activities in the area and super small classes. The smaller the university, typically the smaller the classes. And just a quick word on sort of a different kind of admission program that virtually all of our state universities have. With one exception that I'm aware of, you get selected for this. You don't apply for it, but there is one exception that I will talk about. These are special programs for kids who are first gen or socioeconomically disadvantaged and who all have demonstrated a very strong desire to succeed. And these are kids who will get very, really superb counseling, smaller classes. And they are kids who have definitely been disadvantaged in one way or another. And I've just listed, 7 of them. But I think pretty much almost every one of our schools has these special programs where it is a bit easier to get into. Like, for example, I'd like to go into a little bit more detail about the CARE program, because it is the one for which you can apply. You don't have to be selected. And it is at FSU. You can see the range of kids who actually got admitted for this year. And they only take 350 kids a year. But again, for any disadvantaged kid, it is a wonderful opportunity to go to FSU. And just a quick word about financial aid. This is not my area of expertise. I do know enough to make me dangerous. But every college in the country for which you are looking for need-based aid does require the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, and it opens up on October 1st. That changed 2 or 3 years ago. It used to open January 1st. And it will now be based on what you may have heard the term prior, because your kids are going to be, let's say this next graduating class will be going to college in the year 2020. It is based on your 2018 income. And I would advise that if you are looking for need-based aid for your current senior, that the minute this application opens on October 1st, you start getting online and learning about it. And many of our state universities will tell you that there is priority if you file it pretty much right away. If you're not sure if you're going to qualify for financial aid or not, there is a financial aid calculator online that simulates the FAFSA. It's on a website called FinAid, as in financialaid.org. And it can approximate what your EFC is, which is your expected family contribution, which is the number the federal government calculates, the real one, which goes to colleges and tells the college, well, you can afford $30,000 a year. Whether you agree or not may not matter, but if the college costs $50,000 a year and they're going to give you financial aid, they know that you need $20,000. Some are committed to full aid, others are committed to, let's say, 80 or 90% of demonstrated need. And some of it may be in the form of loan, some of it in the form of grant that does not have to be repaid, and some of it in the form of work study. And there are some colleges, many colleges, in fact, where the higher your SAT or ACT score is, the more your grant is likely to be and the less your loan is, because they know that the higher, if they offer you more money, you're more likely to come. And if they'll do it if you have a high enough SAT or ACT score to raise their average so that the rank will go up in US News and World Report. So just a quick word about rankings, because they did come out just last week. These are considered the 5 most, let me just say, prestigious. Please, they are not the top, but these are the 5 typically the hardest to get into state universities in the country. So the first 2 in California, part of the UC system, University of Michigan, University of Virginia, and Georgia Tech. Where's Florida in this? University of Florida has raised up considerably. It is considered the 6th most prestigious state university in the whole country. Do you know what this will mean to admissions this year? Okay, so whatever the numbers have been, guess what? They're going up. I'm sorry. And what the trickle-down effect, it means everybody else's numbers are going up. Okay, looking at all of our state universities, quite a few of them were ranked. 9 out of 12 were ranked. One of them is ranked in liberal arts colleges as opposed to the national ranks. And by the way, this is the magazine, U.S. News and World Report. You can buy on newsstands, not just now, it's usually available for months and months and months. Or you can go online and for, I don't know, $20 or $30, you can get a 1-year subscription. I use my 1-year subscription constantly, go in and look for more and more detailed data because you can drive down very deep in their rankings. And again, I don't care about the rank. I just care that something is mentioned or that I can look at SAT or ACT scores or the percent admitted. Sorry, Florida Poly, it's too new. And I don't know that it meets, I don't know if it meets the qualifications yet for national rank, but it does meet other qualifications. So some colleges are ranked regionally. And so our other 3 state universities happen to be ranked regionally. And the fact that it sets Florida Poly is unranked, it just doesn't have enough data yet to be ranked, but it is high enough to be mentioned. So every one of our state universities has been mentioned by U.S. News and World Report. And U.S. News and World Report does not mention all 3,000 schools in this country. Looking at the business schools, what do we have? 3, 6, 9 of them are ranked nationally. And again, just because something is ranked 260 doesn't mean it's, oh my God, it's only the 260, state, university that's ranked in business. No, it was even mentioned. And there's I'm sure there's well over 1,000 colleges that have a business major.
You know what's one international business?
International business number 1 might be the I can look it up in a minute, but I believe it's the University of South Carolina.
No, I mean,
Here, nobody is ranked 1 in international business, but we are ranked 2 in international business, and that is Florida International University. I don't know if any of our other state universities are ranked in international business, but again, you can find it online in U.S. News and World Report if you drill down into the rankings. And in engineering, a number of our schools are again ranked. I think it's 8 of them. And 3 of them are ranked a bit separately, the ones with stars. Sorry, that should have been an asterisk at the very bottom. But they are only ranked amongst colleges that don't award a doctoral degree in engineering. The others are ranked among colleges that do award a doctoral degree in engineering. FSU, by the way, shares its engineering program with FAMU, and I believe it is on the FAMU campus. So FAMU is the one that is ranked. And a few other things from SCORE at the top, and I may turn this over to Jason to explain exactly what they mean, because we have a couple of promotions going on now for back to school offers. Jason can explain them a little bit more.
So we have a couple things right now. We have our $99 college application essay review, which will basically get you a review of whatever essay you would like. It's basically, you can use it as a one-time gig, but one of our application experts will take a look at your essay. We'll send it back to you with commentary, and then you'll set up a 15-minute, either in person or via phone or Skype conference with that person to talk about how you can improve it. And that, typically we charge $180 to over $400 an hour for working with essay experts. We have a refresher tutoring special, which says if you buy 10 hours of tutoring up front, then you get 10% off. We have a SAT and ACT decision plan to help you decide which test might be best for you. It's $49. And if you want any help mapping out your testing calendar for your entire high school career, really. I mean, you could start as early as a sophomore and even as a freshman just to get a sense of it. But you could sit down with one of our Learning Center directors and they will walk you through the entire process on when you should start. They'll answer all your questions. It's totally free. Hopefully you do the prep with us. 2 more things I wanted to mention that aren't on here. Maybe our next webinar is going to be on, okay, no, that's my mother will mention it. And the other thing is we do have another presentation here on Thursday night, which will not be by webinar. It's going to be a financial planning webinar put on by Merrill Lynch. Presentation. I'm sorry. It's only available live in our Boca Raton office, and it's actually one of our former tutors is now a broker at Merrill Lynch, and he's coming back to do this for us. So that's going to be September 19th at 6 p.m. If you'd like to come, just call 561-241-1610. That's our Boca Raton number. Ask for Tammy and tell her you'd like to register to come to that presentation.
Can you talk a little bit more about what he's going to discuss at that?
Yeah, so he'll be talking about financial aid. He'll be talking about just ways of getting yourself prepared financially for college. So obviously, the earlier you are in the process, the more advice you might be able to give, the more things you might be able to do. The later you are, as far as financial aid goes, since you're going prior, you're pretty much too late to do anything. And you can consider doing something for 2 years down the road, because you can always you submit a new FAFSA every single year you're in college. And then at that point, they'll reconsider, where your earnings are and your assets.
There are things like a savings account that might be in your child's name versus in your name. Which one is it better to spend money out of, paying for your child's expense, whether it's paying for private school or gas for the car or new clothes for school, so that it won't be taxed quite as much in terms of financial aid? They'll be able to explain the ins and outs of, so the sooner you can plan for, if you have a younger student who isn't going to be ready for college for 3 or 4 years, you have a lot more time to be able to, let's say, plan things out, reposition things so that you may qualify for a better financial aid package. So our next webinar, I'm doing one next week. It'll be held up in our Palm Beach Gardens Learning Center. It's on October 2nd at 7 p.m. And it is a more general presentation than tonight's. It is just about selective college admissions. So a selective college is any college that doesn't accept 100% of its students, but it's how to stand out and get in. And then there are previous webinars that are on our website now. They're webinars that we've done in the past that we hold on to them on the website about understanding your PSAT scores. Might be a great webinar to do around December when your kids get their PSAT scores. I'll probably be doing it again live then. How to get testing accommodations for SAT or ACT. How to figure out which is your better test, SAT or ACT. In fact, I'm speaking tomorrow evening at King's Academy specifically about SAT versus ACT, which is the better test for you. And then we're actually doing, we've done an online prep course for PSAT. It was a double webinar, and it was a very interactive, solving problems. We may be doing it again this year prior to this year's PSAT. So it's basically an opportunity for a student to participate in 2 free PSAT prep sessions with 2 of our PSAT prep experts. So we do hope you'll tell your friends about us for our tutoring and test prep and college counseling. And we are also a school. I mentioned we're at the top learning centers and school. So we do have fully accredited schools in all of our locations: Boca, Palm Beach Gardens, Wellington, Weston, and Coral Springs. And our classes are very small. They could be as small as 1 student or as big as 7 or 8 students. And we are fully approved by College Board for all the AP courses and even by the NCAA, so that we work with an awful lot of athletes. Perhaps you'll follow me on Facebook or Twitter, College Council on Twitter, and on Facebook, Score at the Top Learning Centers. Basically, I am constantly posting information about college admission or education. So I'll see if there are any other questions that are from the audience.
Yeah. So can you repeat the rule about the University of Texas?
Okay. So the 6% rule of University of Texas, they are required to accept the top 6% of the graduating class of every Texas high school. And that basically leaves very little space for out-of-state students. It turns out it's the same number, 6%. I believe it's 6% of the University of Texas students are from out of state.
How does the study abroad work on that teachers?
Great question. How to study abroad work with Bright Futures. I believe that if you are doing a school's own study abroad program, I believe the Bright Futures will follow you, but you might be doing someone else's study abroad. Like, for instance, University of Pittsburgh has a wonderful study abroad program called Semester at Sea. How'd you like to go on a cruise for 5 months around the world on a nice ship? You can go on any other college's study abroad program. It doesn't have to be your own, but I don't believe that any of your financial aid from any source goes with you if you go to another college's study abroad. But I do think Bright Futures might go with you if you're doing a study abroad, but that's a great question. I need to get that answered. Go ahead. We have a question here.
If your child has written an essay that's kind of mediocre because somebody not so competitive school, can you change it for different schools?
So, great question. On the Common App, I'll make a more general question. What if you submit your Common App to a college and then you realize, oh my God, I've got a better essay, or I've got a better score of a report, or my counselor just changed and I want to change her name, or no, I no longer want to major in business, I want to major in underwater basket weaving. Can you change your application? You can change anything you want on your Common App after you've applied, and only those changes will apply only to the colleges to which you have not yet applied.
Does FSU give scholarships to arts kids?
Oh, I don't know the answer to this question either. I'm going to guess it's yes. Does FSU give scholarships to arts students? I'm going to guess the answer is yes, but I don't know for sure. I'm going to have to make a list of questions to ask when I'm on campus.
Can you do 2 majors at FSU?
Can you do 2 majors at FSU? The answer is yes. You can do 2 majors at almost any college, and some colleges may put some limitations on it. Like, I believe if you're a performing arts major at University of Michigan, which is very conservatory-like, that I don't believe you can second major unless you spend an extra year. Don't quote me on that. But in most colleges, you can do a double major, and they don't even have to be related. So I can do a math major and an English major, completely unrelated. I can do an engineering major and a philosophy major. I can do 2 completely unrelated things and major in them.
I know you had someone on this, but briefly, the SAT and the ACT, and then you said you have one where you guess, do you have an overall?
There's a handout right here on SAT versus ACT, and it explains the major differences between them. And I guess if you sneak into King's Academy tomorrow night, that's what I'm speaking about at King's Academy as well. I'm sure that I'll be doing another presentation this year on SAT versus ACT.
Mine's a little specific, so the intern in general, I have an athlete. He's starting shortstop this summer on the state team, a good baseball team. He's conflicted about playing baseball in college. We don't know a lot about it. We don't know what to do. But he's had schools like Columbia look at
Come after him, good.
Well, I don't know if I'm after him, but look at it, express interest. So he has somewhere between 75 and close to 100% for Bright Futures. So we're really conflicted. Do we go with Bright Futures and stay in Florida and he doesn't have to play baseball? Or do we go for something like Columbia where he gets this big name school, plays baseball, and is under that rigor? I mean, he loves baseball, but it's rigorous. We know that.
So the big question is, what do you do when you have a recruited athlete? In terms of, like, should they, if we're really smart, should they stay in Florida and get the Bright Future Scholarship and not have to play baseball? Or should they take recruitment from a very prestigious university? And by the way, Columbia wouldn't give him money for baseball. They might find another way to give him money, but they won't give him money for baseball. And I do know that the schools are out there recruiting now, because I have a sophomore who was just recruited for baseball for an incredibly prestigious university. And so, yeah, they do recruit kids really early for baseball. It will depend where he is going to be happiest and where he's going to be academically the most successful. If he likes let's say Columbia, needs to go up there, on an official visit, or actually can't do an official visit yet if he's this young, but he can go up there on a visit. And he has to decide, does he like the Great Books curriculum at Columbia? Does he like living on a beautiful, small, stately campus in a part of New York that some people might not want to live in, although it is a very, very safe school with a gorgeous campus? Does he like that academic environment? Does he like the intellectual environment? You know, he may come out of it saying, oh, I love Columbia, I love to read, and it's a great school for a kid who loves to read because of their great books curriculum. Or he might come out of it saying, oh my God, I don't want to go to school with these kids. Before he commits, he really needs to see a few schools. So if there's a few of them looking at him, he really needs to, you need to get him to see those schools because these coaches are looking for answers. Right. And as long as he keeps up with his baseball and keeps up his academics, that's really what he needs to do academically to keep up, you know, to get in. Yes, it's not an easy decision. And at some of the D1s, well, the D1 schools, the coach owns your life. Right. And so you have to decide, do you love the sport enough to be under those conditions? Some coaches may tell you, like Friday night, Saturday night, you have a curfew of 10 o'clock. You know, you can't join a fraternity yet, or yeah, right. But they also will move a tutor in with you if you're struggling. Some of the schools. Okay, next.
Let's see. Do you know the stats for the online UF program?
I don't know the stats for the online UF program, but I'm going to guess that they're much lower than the stats for regular UF.
What's the difference between an honors program and a normal program?
The difference between an honors program and a normal program is that in an honors program, you're taking the same courses, but you're taking much smaller sections of them. So you're not going to have a class, let's say, of 350 kids taking intro to psychology. You might have 30, 35 kids taking intro to psychology. Everyone in your class will be in the honors program, and you probably have a handpicked professor for it.
How important are AP scores to UF FSU? Okay.
How important are AP scores to UF and FSU? Common Application gives you room for your AP scores there and your IB scores, but doesn't provide room for ACE scores, by the way. That might tell you something. They're optional whether you report them or not. They're certainly not in my top 10 list of what colleges look for when they're looking at kids, but I would say that if you have pretty high scores, like for instance, if you got one of the AP Scholar Awards, AP Scholar with honor, with distinction, etc., putting that on your resume is incredibly helpful, and sharing your scores. If you have a bunch of ones and twos, don't share them.
Can you just explain the difference between the regional rank and the national rank?
The regional rank and the national rank, basically colleges are regional, are considered regional, I believe. If they tend to draw their student body population from a relatively local area. U.S. News and World Report actually has 8 regional lists. 4 for universities, 4 for colleges. The difference being one has graduate school, the other one doesn't. And there are always some really like fabulous schools listed in there. Who is it that's in there? High Point University, North Carolina, #1 in the South. And it's actually listed, let me think, it's listed as a college, not as a university, but it does have a graduate school. But I think it doesn't yet have enough graduate either students or programs. But regional, I often look at the regional lists when I'm trying to come up with a list of colleges for students. Many of them are absolutely fabulous schools. Some of them really B- student would be absolutely fine. There are definitely a lot on there for stronger students as well. And the 8 lists that they have, 4 for college, 4 for university, and they have, let's see, North, South, Midwest, and West for each location.
And someone wrote that, I think it's on the UF, that keep in mind they may limit you to 11 credits if they accept you for spring admit. I'm not sure.
I don't. Oh, if they admit you for spring, that you might only be able to take 11 credits. I've never heard that. I don't know.
Okay.
And by the way, they're not the only schools that admit for spring. There are plenty of universities that now admit for spring. And basically what they're saying is, we really want you. We want you more than if we just waitlisted you. We don't want you quite enough to give you all-out admission, but you're like almost there. and we know that we'd love to have you second semester. And honestly, if there's something you know that you can do productively, and this is really the school of your dreams, it's worth, all good things are worth waiting for. And trust me, there are hundreds of phenomenal gap programs out there. I keep track of them because a lot of families will come to me when they're just looking for a gap program. I mean, hey, President Obama's daughter did a gap year before she started Harvard. So you can always do a gap program.
As we said,
I think one or two more, and then we're gonna say goodnight.
his son was limited, son was limited, and FAMU to only run credits from Palm Beach State before starting spring.
Oh, okay. So there may be a rule that if you're starting in the spring, that you can only take a certain number of credits first semester. Somebody wrote in saying that his son was limited to 11 credits, which is either, I guess, 3 or 4 courses that he could take at Palm Beach State. And by the way, that's probably legitimate. The kid who's getting in for spring is probably a slightly, very slightly lower, academics and test scores are both than the kids who are getting in for summer or fall. So you might want to start that student off with fewer credits, because if you take a full complement, which is typically somewhere 15, 16, 17 credits, that might be a bit too much for a student. So starting off at 11 credits, which is like 3 or 4, typically 3 or 4 subjects, might be just right. Yeah.
Can I ask the question about private regional Florida school?
Yes, Florida Regional Pub. Yeah, regional.
College university that I recently heard about, and I don't know a lot about it.
Which one?
Rollins?
Okay, so Rollins is private,
Right.
and I think Rollins might be also might be listed like number 2 in the South.
Yeah,
in the South, right?
Like
I think it's listed right after High Point. Fabulous school. Very, very social. Huge out-of-state population. I want to say off the top of my head, and I'm just guessing, maybe 2,500 kids. The place looks like a country club. It's gorgeous. It's right on a lake. The student center has a gorgeous view of the lake with outdoor tables and dining. They have a nice range of majors. They're an incredibly safe neighborhood in Winter Park. Close enough to home for kids to, come home on several weekends. But I'd say it's very, very socially savvy kids. So if you had a socially awkward kid, I think they'd be not as comfortable there. I hope nobody's listening from Rollins. I mean, I'm not saying anything bad about you. I just know that the kids who and I've been on campus a half a dozen times. It is a phenomenal place for I'd say the BB plus motivated student. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the Southern Coalition, not the application coalition, but my understanding is that you can get in-state tuition from some of the southern states around us?
I'm not aware of southern states that necessarily have a tuition, let me say, exchange type program with Florida. Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think that probably the best thing to do is just to Google and to find that out, that if you went to, I don't know, University of Kentucky or University of Tennessee or Ole Miss or any of those, if there are any discounts for Florida kids. I haven't heard of that, but maybe there are. I think last question.
In regards to test optional schools, are you less likely to get in without sending SAT scores? Students with high GPA, 4.6 in SAT.
Okay, so the question basically is, what do you do with an SAT optional school? Do you send your scores or not? And are you more likely or less likely to get in one way or the other? First of all, most schools don't even tell you the percent that they admitted with scores and the percent they admitted without scores. And many of these schools have done it, I'd say, more for altruistic reasons, which basically to encourage more kids to apply. Because if you know you've got really great grades, but your scores aren't so great, you might not have applied in the past. And by the way, these schools all thought that their rank would go up in U.S. News and World Report because only kids with high scores tend to submit them. So like, for instance, George Washington University is one of the largest, most well-known schools that went test optional. And basically, they got a more diverse population applying, a lot more kids applying this year. And so basically, their SAT average went up, and that kind of helped raise their rank in U.S. News and World Report. This year, U.S. News and World Report dinged colleges who admitted at least 25% of their kids without scores. I don't know how much they dinged them, but I do know, I haven't finished reading all their methodology yet. But my advice to kids always is to look at every college that I know of that's test optional, still publishes scores. I mean, there's a way to find out what their mid 50% is. And I would say that if you're at the midpoint or better, send your scores. And if you're not, hide them. However, many of these test optional schools still require your scores if you're applying for a scholarship, not necessarily, not need-based, but a merit-based award. And certainly if you're an athlete, you must submit your scores because the NCAA eligibility is based strictly on GPA, the way they do it, and SAT or ACT. There's a sliding scale, and you have to have your NCAA eligibility before you can be recruited for a D1 or D2 school. But I think at that, I'm going to sign off, but I will tell you that if you have questions, you can email me, Judi, and it's Judi at scoreatthetop.com. And I just want to thank all of you here for coming, and I'll certainly stay a few extra minutes here, and certainly for, our audience. Thank you so much for listening, and good luck with your college admission. Good night.